Chapter 7. Around the campfire. So the pair left the rainbow's end, headed in a direction that would cross the trail leading to the peaks. The rainbow walkers were miles from their starting point. As the sun was going down in the west, they regained the trail and prepared to camp for the night. The fox was obviously interested in the boy's story. He had been completely surprised by the boy's recognition of the items in the chest. The fox scurried to ready their encampment. Just when the fox sat down, expecting to hear the boy's story, the boy said in a teasing manner, I think I'll take a walk down by the brook. I'll be back later. The fox knew what he was doing, yet he couldn't help saying, Oh, come on. The boy smirked as he walked off. With a cocky stride and a strong sense of arrogance, he walked down to the creek. He stood there gazing at really nothing, when a thought caused that irritating attitude to shift to a serious, somber tone. After a bit, he walked back to the campfire with a totally different gait and mindset. The night birds were calling, a coyote echoed in a call, and night was settling in around the travellers. The boy took a deep breath and said, Well, my friend, I can feel myself changing and I like it. I used to feel so angry. I only thought about right now. Christmas wasn't even that great. I always found my present while Mum and Dad were at work. Only having fun now or fighting with my parents was how I acted. I stole things real often. I could move into mini-marts fast and smooth. If I felt like candy or peanuts, I'd leave the store with 3 or 4 of them. I was so good. And I never got caught. Yet, deep down, I knew it was wrong. The fox intently nodded and said, Yes, boy, I can see that nature in you. Well, Fox, I had this crazy dream all the time. It was always just about the same dream. Go on, implored the fox. The boy looked at the fox and said, In fact, it kind of shames me in a way to even think about it. It's too late, kid. You have to tell me now, the fox said, a little frustrated. All right. Well, the dream always started with me travelling along in this forest. I was walking, feeling bored and looking for excitement, for something to happen. I saw this old cabin. It was old but well kept. I thought that it probably didn't belong to anybody important. And I was hungry, and the customs of the people of that land were such that they loved to visit and give you something to eat if you were a traveller and came to their door. So I did. But I didn't do it nicely at all. I was so self-centered. I remember I walked up to the door, but it wasn't a door. It was just a blanket over a doorway. I threw that blanket aside and I was angry and I hollered into the shack, Anyone home? I'm hungry. What you got to eat? Well, this little old lady came out of the back room. She was poor. You could tell by her clothes. They were stained and frayed. She had her hair pulled back in a bun. She was kind of a sweet-looking old lady, but I didn't care. All I wanted was something to eat. The shack was made of logs and had blankets tacked on that covered the window holes. But even though she was poor and nothing expensive was lying around, the place was as neat as a pin. Anyway, this old woman smiled at me and said, Welcome, young traveller. Come on in. I stuck my head in and looked around. I had a sneer on my face and I felt angry and irritated and I said, What's for dinner? The little old lady said, Well, we've got some beans. That's about all we have tonight. I remember telling her, I don't like beans. And she said, Well, there's also a little bit of cornmeal. I could make you some cornbread. I don't like that either, I grumbled. But hurry up and fix it. And as I sat down on one of her few chairs, the husband of the household came in. It was easy to tell from his clothes and his axe that he was a woodcutter and that he was pretty beat at the end of the day's work. He looked weary when he ducked his head through the blanket over the door, but when he saw me, his face brightened and he said, Oh, hi, how are you? It's good to have you with us. I frowned and I said, I'm lousy. This isn't exactly the Ritz. But Fox, the man didn't get mad at me or anything. He only said, "Well, it's all we have. We're sure willing to share it with you, though, boy." The old woman had no sooner put the beans on the table before I grabbed the ladle from the pot and began pigging out and putting practically all of it on my plate. Before they could even sit down, I was stuffing it into my mouth. This was really horrible, Fox. But I finished it, and then leaned back and let out a great big burp, picked up the clean tablecloth, wiped my mouth with it, and left a big brown smear on it. When she brought out the cornbread, I reached over to the pan. There were 6 big pieces, and I grabbed 4 of them. I put them on my plate and helped myself into even more beans, leaving only about half a plate at the bottom of the pot, and the 2 little pieces of cornbread. As the husband and the wife were just sitting down to the table, I stood up because I was ready to leave. The husband and wife glanced at each other, and their eyes were really sad, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of there. As I was going toward the door, I saw this thing. It was the custom to leave whatever valuable you have by your door so your guests could see them and admire them on their way in and out of your home. This thing caught my attention. It was a beautiful brooch, but it was cheap. It was obviously not very valuable, but it probably was the only thing they had. It was shaped like a shield, and it had black jade in the middle and fake rubies all around the rim. Looking back at the couple, I quickly picked it up and slipped it into my pocket without missing a step. I glanced back over my shoulder to see if they had noticed, and the first thing I remember seeing was the old man slowly shaking his head and his wife hanging her head and crying. I don't think she was crying because she noticed I had taken a brooch. I think it was because of the way I acted. After I left the house, I was walking along, whistling as I went. Then I noticed that all of a sudden my pocket was getting heavier and heavier. It was the strangest feeling. So I reached in and picked the brooch out of my pocket and looked at it. But as I held it in my hand, it suddenly got real hot. So I put it back in my pocket where it wouldn't burn me. But it was still heavy. Fox, this dream was always the same. After the brooch got heavy, this bird came along and kind of hovered and fluttered right in front of me. And instead of saying, "Hey bird," or anything like that, I hit it. And I backhanded it and knocked it out of the air. And the bird went tumbling over backward, and some of its feathers fell off. It flew off into a tree, kind of composed itself, and looked back down at me. It looked like it wanted to talk to me, but it was too afraid to get very close. So I continued along, and the bird hopped from tree to tree, but stayed carefully out of reach. Every time I would take the brooch out of my pocket and looked at it, it got real hot in my hand, and I would quickly put it back into my pocket again. Then as I turned down this one trail, I saw a castle, a rich-looking castle, and I remember thinking, I'm going to go get lots out of this place. I started up the path that was on an incline up to the castle gate. That little bird was over in a tree by the side of the path, waiting for me to get close. The path was made of gravelly sand. As I walked up the path, it got harder to walk because as I neared the drawbridge, the path got steeper. I'd take a step and slip back. Sometimes I slid all the way back down to the bottom. The walking became hard and the brooch became heavier and heavier all the time. Finally, the bird said, boy, do you want some advice?" "Get lost," I told it, but I continued to struggle and get nowhere. As the afternoon got later and it got close to sundown, the cast-iron door opened over the moat, the drawbridge lowered, and a wise-looking old man came out to the edge of the drawbridge and looked down at the incline at me as I struggled. And he said to me, "My son, in many lands and in many tongues, I am called Teak. I would love to have you as a guest, however, you have errors in your life." I looked up at him and asked, "What do you mean?" Teak said, "Something is keeping you there. You cannot go forward." I was such a jerk that I flipped him off and said, "Get lost, old man." And so the old man left. But as he did, he said, "I'll see you tomorrow." Well, I stayed there in the shale, still trying to keep going up, but still sliding back down. I tried to walk up the left side and slid back down, and the same was on the right side. I continued walking and sliding and stepping and sliding all night long. As the sun came up the next morning, I was still in the same place. Teak came out again at daybreak and he said, "Boy, you have error in your life. You are not going anywhere." I still ignored him. He returned up to the castle and night came. All night long I continued to slip and step and slip and step. Day came again and the old man, he came out again. Then night came again and I stayed stuck. Finally I said to myself, well, it's probably this stupid old brooch. So I reached into my pocket and was going to throw it away. But when I threw it, it only went out a little way into the air and then sprang right back into my hand. I threw it again and again and again, and it sprang again and again back into my hand as though it were a paddle ball slapping against the paddle. At that point, the bird flew up and asked, "My son, what's keeping you from getting you where you want to go?" "Nothing," I yelled, and it quickly flew away. The old man came out that evening and he said, "Boy, you're going nowhere." I still ignored him. I lost track of how many days I was stuck there, Fox. The dream made it seem like it was many days and nights that I stayed stuck. One morning the old man came out just as always and asked, "Boy, is this helping you?" I was getting real tired. So finally I thought, okay, so I stole a cheap brooch, so what? Teak repeated, "There is error in your life." I knew what he meant, so I said, "Okay, I took this crummy cheap old brooch. It's worthless." "That's not the point, young man," Teak said. And then he said, "What should you do?" And I said, "Well, I guess I should take it back, huh?" The old man looked at me and he didn't say anything. I figured he wanted more, so I asked, "Should I be kind?" Still, he just looked at me and I went on. "Say I'm sorry? Promise that I'll never do it again? Help them get some more money? I don't know." The old man asked me, "Have you ever asked someone to forgive you?" No. And I said, "No, that's stupid. No one has ever asked me to forgive them." But my words sounded hollow, even in my own ears. And I realized that I was still in the same place. And I knew that I really did need to go back to that little cabin and ask them for forgiveness. So I told him, "Okay, I'll do it." No sooner had I said that than I realized that I was suddenly free from the shale. I turned down the path, feeling energized, and I ran like a deer. It seemed as though I was flying as I went down the path toward the cabin. No one was home, but I laid the brooch down in the spot where I had taken it from. Then I turned and raced back to the old man's castle. Teak was still standing at the top of the drawbridge, and he said, "My son, I want to show you your future, and I want to help you. But there's something else you have to do. You have to complete your circle. You have to ask them for forgiveness." And I said, "Come on, Teak, I took it back already. I'm sorry, honest I am." And the wise old man said, "Not enough to complete the circle." So I went back, fast as a deer, back to the cabin. When I got there, the old woman was coming out of the cabin, yelling to her husband, He brought Susie's brooch back." I stopped and saw the two people show precious attention to that worthless brooch. They were caressing it. At once, both of them saw me and standing there and said, "It was our daughter's." I remember swallowing hard as I looked at them and I said, "This is hard for me to say, but could you—" I faltered. "Could you—" It was as though I just couldn't say the words. Finally I got it out. "Could you forgive me for being so rude and eating all of your food and stealing from you?" Tears showed in the old man's and the old woman's eyes. but they were happy tears. And then I began to cry, even though I was relieved to say all that I had said. I was relieved, but at the same time I was embarrassed. So I backed away from the cabin and raced back to the old man. Back at the castle, the wise man greeted me, saying, "My son, come in." He took me into a banquet room, and there laying before me was a table full of the finest, richest food you could ever imagine, plate after plate of terrific-looking food. I sat down and gorged myself. The old man made me feel at home and comfortable, even welcome. I ate and I ate and I ate until I felt I couldn't eat any more. When I finished, the old man led me into another room, a larger room, larger than the banquet room. In this room were many treasures. There were treasure chests everywhere, with lids open and filled with overflowing jewels. Teak invited me to select 3 treasures. So I went through the chests, and I handled many priceless items, but I couldn't decide what to keep. And finally the old man suggested that I take the 3 things I had in my hands. He said I was going to need those 3 things on a future journey I was going to have. And Fox, it was these 3 gifts: the golden key, a shield bracelet, and this diamond with the amber liquid. I haven't been able to crack the diamond. Then the old man said, "Come, let me show you an even more important chamber." He took me into another large room and he told me, "Go ahead, go in by yourself. I want you to see something. Don't be afraid." I looked into the room. It was a large library. The wise man didn't enter with me, and I walked into the room alone. The hardwood floor was richly polished, and the rugs were works of art. In the center was a wooden podium with a large picture album on it. There were books all along the walls, books everywhere. I walked up to the podium, and as I did, Teak said from behind me, "Look to the front." When I got right up to it, I saw that the book was open, and that it had pictures in it. And as I looked closer, I noticed that the pictures were of me. I turned toward the front, and as I did so, I saw myself as I was before. Anger, lies, and blame are words to describe how I looked, acted, talked, and felt. With every page, I saw myself further and further in the past. I was out of control with anger and blame. My thoughts were interrupted by Teak, who said, "Look to the back." So I started turning the pages, and I began to see pictures of a young man, apparently happy, a man with a wife and family. I saw scenes that were positive, warm scenes, scenes filled with laughter and happiness. Flipping backward again, I felt a little troubled as I saw myself in the past. I saw a kid quite different from the young man. Tears came to my eyes, and then a voice boomed, "Don't despair." So I flipped back to the future, to the happier scenes. As I looked through the future scenes, there was so much that I couldn't understand. I began getting dizzy. It was as though the room was spinning, and Teak's voice very faintly said, "Goodbye." And then I remember falling down. "Well, Fox, that's twice a picture album has done that to me," the boy chuckled. He continued, "I remember also waking up and finding myself outside. I checked my pockets, and the 3 things were still there. Sitting up and leaning against a log, I heard voices. 3 pirate-looking characters. One even had a peg leg. Were walking through knee-deep grass and looking for someone or something. I figured that I'd better be safe, so I hid the 3 items in the log. Feeling cocky and fast, I rose and ran 20 yards away, turned and yelled, 'Hey, Pegleg! Hey, Patchy! Catch me if you can!' And off I raced, often right into a trip to the bathroom. I'd usually wake up while running. Anyway, Fox, that's how I came about getting these treasures." "Interesting," said the fox. "You've got some mysterious but valuable-looking treasures here. And you know what else?" The boy shook his head as the fox continued. "They are now part of your journey. Don't lose your belt." "Yeah, that's true," thought the boy. Teak said I would need them later. Out loud he said, I feel stronger and better than ever. But you know what? I think more than just getting these back. The reason I feel so good now is because I've looked at so many things that I'm thankful for. There are things that have happened in my life that I just never thought of being thankful for. Like the lesson I learned in the spider's web. Yeah, I'll never do or say anything without thinking again. The fox, with concern on his brow, said, Boy, never say never, unless, well, unless you're absolutely sold out to change. The boy and the fox looked eye to eye at each other, and they smiled.